Many of the principles and practices of restorative justice come to us from indigenous cultures around the world. It's important to acknowledge that fact for a lot of reasons. For one, we don't just want people who look like me, Raiden Edseth-Griffin, hello and welcome, to dominate the discourse surrounding restorative justice. Is it a little ironic for me to be saying that when I'm starting a YouTube channel where I just talk about restorative justice? Probably, but that's why it's important for me to make sure you know that this is not just a white movement, nor is it a patriarchal movement. It's also important to note that my knowledge on this subject is limited. I only know what I've been taught and what I've found through some very basic research. This video is not intended to be a comprehensive deep dive on the subject, so the information I give you is not necessarily complete. But I hope to make more videos on the subject as I learn more in the future. One key principle I was taught as part of my RJ education is Ubuntu, which is a word that is translated from a number of African Bantu languages to mean either humanity or I am because we are. Ubuntu comes to us from a number of countries in Africa, including but not limited to Botswana, Kenya, Namibia, Uganda, and Zimbabwe. And Ubuntu has its own word and its own meaning in all these different places because it's actually a philosophy all on its own, separate from restorative justice. And although the particular practices and definitions of Ubuntu vary across cultures, the central theme stays the same: the interconnectedness and interdependence of all humans. Already, I'm sure you can see how this contrasts with our very individualistic and hierarchical culture. The messaging in our culture says, if you're poor, if you're unhealthy, if you're unemployed, these things are your fault, and therefore why should I pay to fix your mistakes? Of course, we know that's not necessarily true, or even usually true, but it's become so normalized that a lot of us don't really question it. But with Ubuntu in our hearts, we know it actually benefits us to help each other, not because we necessarily expect anything in return, but because it's understood that we're supposed to help each other. It doesn't matter if a person's situation is their fault or not, and in a lot of cases it probably isn't anyway. What matters is their humanity and our humanity. So Ubuntu is a foundational pillar of the RJ philosophy as it was taught to me. You really can't do restorative justice without being invested in the health and well-being of your community and the individuals within it. I don't really see any way around that. That's all I've got on Ubuntu for now, but I'll probably find a book or two, or maybe even an expert to talk to on this channel, that we can have some more learning about Ubuntu in the future. Moving on, let's talk about circles, one of the most widely distributed practices of restorative justice. If you don't know much about circles, that's okay. I expect probably quite soon we'll do a dedicated circles video where I'll go in depth on it. But for the sake of this video, I'll give you a quick rundown of how circles work. Circle is a tool we use to facilitate discussion. The basic idea is everyone involved in the discussion in the circle sits in a circle, and one or two people leads the discussion as the circle keeper. The circle keeper brings also a talking piece and has sometimes a script, although it's not necessarily so rigid. The circle keeper's job is to introduce topics of discussion in rounds, and every round they introduce the prompt and they will pass around the talking piece so everyone gets a chance to respond. When you have the talking piece, that's your opportunity to respond, and when you don't have the talking piece, you get to listen. The point of passing around the talking piece in the circle is that it gives everybody an opportunity to have their voice heard. There's more nuance in circles that we'll probably explore in that dedicated video, but I think we've got what we need to continue with this one. Circle process comes to us from indigenous peoples across North America, but it has since spread all across the world. If I'm not mistaken, that sharing process began in Canada in the 90s as a response to the continued mass incarceration and genocide of the indigenous people there. Indigenous communities have used circle process to repair harm and maintain communities for centuries, even millennia. It is a time-tested process that results in not just stronger interpersonal relationships, but healthier communities as a whole. RJ practitioners use circles for all kinds of purposes. Circles can be used for repairing harm, for showing support for someone who has suffered in some way, for celebration. Circles can be used for holding meetings. Circles can be used for teaching and storytelling and all kinds of collaborative processes. In the US, adoption of circles and restorative practices in general has been not as widespread as certainly I would like, but it has been getting some traction over the years. Starting with Oakland in 2009, a lot of schools and school districts have implemented restorative justice and circles as part of their educational and disciplinary policies. Schools being my, not necessarily main focus, but the place I have the most experience in practicing restorative justice, there will probably also be a dedicated video on RJ in schools sometime in the future. Where RJ and circles have only just begun to establish themselves in the US is in the criminal justice system. Certain cities have a restorative option for youth offenders and first time offenders, but it's not the most accessible thing, especially for adult offenders and repeat offenders. This isn't true in a lot of other countries, however. Off the top of my head, I know Scotland, Northern Ireland, Belgium, New Zealand, all these places have dedicated and more robust restorative justice options within their own criminal justice system. They don't all look the same, but they do exemplify how another way can work. Circles are useful for a lot more than just schools and criminal justice, though. We can use circles in therapy, we can use circles in families and in our friendships. We can use circles in the workplace. What makes circles work in all these different spaces is the way it's designed to flatten power structures. Nobody is at the head of the circle. Nobody's necessarily above anyone else. Yes, the circle keeper is sort of vaguely running the show because they are introducing the prompts for each round, but they don't have particular power over anyone else. In the case of circles that are used to repair the harm, circle keepers are never a primary stakeholder or often even a secondary stakeholder. Circle keepers are intended to be as impartial as possible in situations like that while still being people who care. Even something as simple as sitting in the shape of a circle ensures that nobody is at the front or back or at the head or feet of the meeting. Acknowledging and celebrating RJ's indigenous heritage is an essential part of decolonizing knowledge in general in our culture. Throughout this video, even I have sort of fallen into the trap of calling these things indigenous or African or First Nations, and I think that probably plays into the idea that these things, that these particular knowledges are abnormal or somehow exemplary of those cultures as a whole. In reality, these are just other ways of thinking, ways that work, and that have existed in a lot of cases since long before the foundational and canonical thinkers of our culture, and have existed in parallel to them this entire time. Decolonizing is not about diversity and inclusion for their own sake. It's about critically examining the common wisdom we've received to see a reality that's always been there. The reality that our way is not the only way. And that's it for this video, folks. I feel pretty confident in promising a video about circle process and hopeful for more videos about decolonization. Thank you for watching.